So this is explaining the esports industry, and we're here to explain the esports industry. It is a bit of a mystery, I think. Professional gaming, playing video games for pay, how does that make for a potentially $1 billion+ revenue industry by 2017? We're going to give you all the secrets to that right here. Mostly Chris will give all the secrets to how that works.
All the secrets.
Yes, every single one of them. What is esports? For me, it is a common question, and I say, by the way, I'm Jared Wynn. I am the Director of Partnerships for esports at the Daily Dot. I should go ahead and introduce these guys as well before I get started, I think. Sebastian Park, CEO of Team Archon. Chris Badawi, CEO of Renegades, another esports franchise. And Chris Puckett, a host for Activision Media. Is that what you would call it? Just Activision Media these days?
Activision Blizzard Media Networks, I think, is the full title. But
yeah.
Activision Esports, basically.
With MLG specialization?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So as I was saying before I forgot to introduce these folks, I explained that esports is the intersection of a digital culture and competitive culture. Two very popular things, of course, technology and sport. Those things are coming together for the new generations. You know, football, basketball are not that different than Counter-Strike or League of Legends. And I kind of fit that mold myself. I was involved in this going back to 2002. Chris Puckett here was involved going back that same time. He actually worked for MLG starting when?
Started 2003.
2003. So yeah, we have, you know, these big stadiums in Seoul getting filled out now. We have arenas in Germany and here in the States getting filled out. Back in 2003, esports was a very different animal. Can you give us some recollections of what your work entailed and what the environment was like in 2003?
Yeah, actually,
13 years ago.
Even before then, in 2001, I was a professional player in Halo, which meant that I would drive anywhere within 4 hours to play in a tournament that would be about 4 rows of chairs wide. 2003, 2004, started working for Major League Gaming, and we used to throw tournaments in a room about this size. Everyone would bring their own TV. You would have people duct taping cords to the floor. And it's kind of crazy to see how it kept evolving. We used to start with about 50 people coming to these events, and then it was 100 teams. And then you saw thousands of people coming to watch people play. So it's kind of been amazing to see the growth. But back in the old school days, it was just people that were in a small circle. Everyone kind of knew who the other competitors were. And you would meet up once a month, maybe once every 3 months to go and compete.
Even watching a game required some technical expertise. You have to know how to get into the game, like use a console client perhaps within the game itself. It was a strange thing. Now watching a game is, of course, what we expect all the audience to do. 36 million to do for the League of Legends World Championship. That's actually a big number, 36 million last year for the league final compared to, I think, 23 million for the NBA final and for the World Series Game 7 in 2014. So if you think viewers constitute a big and popular sport, then you must think League of Legends is that much bigger than basketball or baseball. That just makes sense. Now, Chris, you got involved more recently in esports, and from an investment and ownership perspective, yeah, there you go. That's appropriate as I call on you. What was it? Obviously, esports has come a long way since those days that Chris Puckett is describing. What was it that brought you to esports now and made you think it was the right industry to get involved in?
Well, I got into the industry about 1.5 years ago, and it's evolved and changed in such radical ways even since then. This industry is moving at just breakneck, unprecedented, absurd, ridiculously fast-paced ways. So I was doing law before I got into this industry, and what I saw was a real opportunity for growth, to capitalize on basically a system, an industry that had so much attention, so much potential that was about to explode. And it sort of is exploding right now. And that's why we're here talking about it. For me, I personally loved it. I loved watching the games, watching the production. It felt to me, watching somebody play a game and watching them just even log on to play independently or in a big tournament with casters and crowds and audiences cheering, right? I got, personally, that same satisfaction from watching that as I got from watching college basketball or football or whatever it was. And when you looked at the numbers that were behind, right, all of the different games in this industry, there is just so much room, right, to capitalize, to monetize in this space that is not being taken advantage of yet. We have so many eyes, which ultimately and eventually will lead to basically growth. right, in many different ways. So.
Sebastian mentioned actually a moment ago when we were speaking before we got on the panel a factoid that was very interesting in terms of number of eyes versus the value we get from each one and potential value in the future. Talking about like how much each one's worth.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about this earlier. Basically, if you look at the calculations of how much an average NBA or an MLB or a football fan generates, it's like what, $4 to $5?
Yeah, it's like $5 to $8, and then in esports that number is per fan, right? $5 to $8 per fan in value. In esports that number is about 2 cents.
And so that's a lot of room right there. That's
We
a
have
lot
of room to
lot of growth there. And on top of that, you look at the industry as a whole, right? Like if you look at the people who are watching, I mean, one of the things that really excited me when I first came in was you rarely see an industry that has all the fundamentals already there, right? Like it has your 18 to 35-year-old fans who are doing pretty well, middle class, upper middle class. You have guys and girls who really enjoy and like have their favorite team, have their favorite player. There's a lot of excitement there, and that really works well with the emergence of like Twitch and YouTube and all this new media that really propels that forward.
And the demo, if you're curious, is like 16 to 34 years old, mostly male, I think like 90%, something like that. So
9%,
we're
yeah.
still working on the diversity, but it's a very promising industry if you're looking to get involved financially because of that potential for growth. And because you can generate a lifelong fan. If you get someone at 16 years old who has a decent financial background and they could be a fan for yours the next 50 years, that's tremendous opportunity. Sebastian, how exactly did you get involved and how long ago was that?
So I first got involved in esports probably 2.5 years ago now, so just a little bit more than you, Chris. But I got involved first. I worked with Namecheap, the domain registrar, and we ran out their esports sponsorships there. We at Namecheap saw, I was like, well, dude, this is the biggest thing that's going to happen. This is going to be what esports to domains will be what NASCAR was for domains 10 years ago. And that was the pitch back then. And I think the pitch is still completely valid now. I think esports as a whole has changed dramatically. Back then, it was really you go to any event and it's a bunch of guys, just drinking or just chilling or playing video games. And now it's a full-blown industry, and that is exciting, scary, and exciting again, all over again. So.
Yeah, you fill up these World Cup stadiums, and I've heard the question before. Why do you go to a live esports event? Like, because you can't play the video game, you're just going to watch someone else play it. Well, if you watch someone play football or basketball and you enjoy that, you can also watch and enjoy someone playing a video game. But that disconnect still exists. Chris Puckett, why do you think that is, and how far along do you think we are in kind of reversing that idea that watching someone play video games is so different than watching someone play any other competitive game?
Yeah, I think a lot of people that have that mentality that they're confused by it probably don't play games themselves. I think one of the core parts of being a gamer is always wanting to improve. So personally, when I'm playing, I'm always trying to get better, and I'll watch people that are better than me and try and learn from that. But it's gotten to the point where we've focused on the personalities, and just like in the UFC, any other major sporting competition, you have Peyton Manning, you have Conor McGregor right now in the UFC. You have personalities that people gravitate towards, and they want to see them either succeed or fail. So you're watching the competition and you're watching a story unfold. You respect the skill, you enjoy watching the competition, but you're also there to support the humans and the human emotion. So I feel like more and more people are starting to just find out that there are these competitions. And it's kind of crazy that mainstream media is so slow to catch on to it, because we did TV shows back in 2006, 2007. We've been doing this for over 12 years in terms of putting on tournaments and broadcasting them. So it's kind of amazing to see the growth, especially in the last 3-4 years, where it's really exploded to the next level.
You mentioned people catching on to it. I mentioned before the viewership numbers, the potential revenue numbers. This is all quite big, and you can't ignore those numbers anymore. So what you have is folks now who have a lot of money and influence wanting to get involved. Chris, of course, prices are now going up for getting involved in esports, for investing in esports. What is it right now, as we get into I think the meat of this discussion, what is it that's driving up prices to invest in esports today as opposed to even just a few months ago?
Well, interest. Interest from big money. Interest from big famous investors that are coming into the scene. Just yesterday, I think Shaquille O'Neal came in as a second round of funding for a League of Legends team. You have people who I work with, like Rick Fox, who just came in. You have a lot of pretty prominent billionaires are looking very heavily in this industry. looking at creating different leagues in different sports. But even just to come in traditionally, there is, I don't know if you would call it a bubble or a land grab. I don't know how you would put it right now, but right now it's like things have inflated and exploded very quickly.
Definitely a land grab right now.
It's a land grab.
Oh yeah, I mean, we don't say the word bubble. I think land grab is definitely the preferred word there.
Sure, I mean, you know, but I mean, this is explaining esports, so I think there's something that we should talk about real quick just before. So it's like there are different ways to view esports, right? And there are certain ways to view it that don't exist in a traditional sense, like when a player logs on to play the game just independently by himself, just logs on to play his game for fun, he might have 50,000 people log on to watch him play. He wakes up in the morning, he has a cereal, gets his computer, turns it on, just plays his game. 50,000 people every day will watch him play that game.
Cereal or whatever the gamer has to do in the morning to wake up. You know, it might not always be cereal, but yeah. The point stands.
Sure.
Yeah.
And mornings, 2 p.m. You know,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
gamers.
And honestly, the corollary is pretty cool, right? Because you see now in the NBA with Steph Curry and what he's doing out there and having his transcendent season, people are coming out and watching him warm up. They're watching him take three-point shots from the key, from the hallways. They're doing it from wherever. And really, that's what's so really exciting about esports is that I would have loved to watch Kobe practice, right? And I can watch Faker practice. You know, like I can go and, you know, watch these guys play, and that's a sentiment that's not only shared by myself, but other people as well.
And not only that, you can talk to them while they're doing it. You can talk to Kobe or the analog in esports while he's practicing, and he'll talk to the chat, you know, to the chat room of the 50,000 or so. It's a little bit clustered when it's 50,000 people in one big chat room, but still, the point stands, the interaction with your favorite stars, if you will, exists in esports in a way that doesn't really exist in any other big sport, certainly
It's
not
so
in this size.
personal.
Yeah.
It's such a personal experience for the viewers. They really do become invested in these players because, I mean, they're able to absorb content in a way that just doesn't exist anywhere else. So if I log in my computer and I'm just talking about what I'm doing, and you can just watch me do that, and watch me play and learn from me, it's a very personal connection. And you follow those players throughout their careers and their paths and their teams. So I think we can reach our demographic in ways that have never been able to really communicate to them in that way before. So I think it's really exciting what we can do with that.
And this is super interesting, Jared, right? Because you were mentioning this as a question to Chris earlier. Like, people are like, hey, how is this like the NFL? Like, I would not, like, why would you go to a football game? Well, because we want to see the fans. In a similar vein, like, esports has that already. Like, people have stadiums. But on top of that, we have this new medium where we can like actually see them and interact with them on the internet, similar to how when you had just the radio, you could hear the plays, but you couldn't see the plays. And then when you had television, you could like see the plays. And now you can interact with the plays, which I think is another and crazy.
Chris?
I think we're just in a really awesome time right now. Smartphones, game changer. Like first it was the internet. We went from everyone having to be in the same room to now you can play online against each other, which meant you could have matches in between tournaments or even just practices that you could be involved in. Then when smartphones came out, I now get tweets all the time of people showing me how they're watching the tournament in class. Maybe they're from Europe and we're doing a North American tournament. They're watching it while holding their son. You know, it's kind of amazing to see people all around the world able to tune in at any time for whatever competition's going on. And esports has grown so big right now that there's almost no time during the day where you can't watch either someone practicing or actually a live competition.
And when we talk about the platform, we should also specify that streaming is looking to be the future of broadcast media, and esports exists almost exclusively on stream. So it's already there. That's part of the reason why it's such a hot ticket, is because it is where the future seems to be already in terms of media. So it seems to have a leg up in that way. Of course, now we're bringing esports back to TV with the E-League on Turner's network. How do you feel, and I'll go to you, Chris, again for this first, since you've been involved in TV shows before, how do you feel things have changed now for esports to come to television, and what impact does that have for the industry as a whole?
Yeah, we tried TV back in 2006, 2007. There was the Championship Gaming Series, which was held on DirecTV. MLG did some Halo productions on USA Networks and G4, but it's not really, television's not built for live matches, I feel. We always had to take a weekend of matches and cut it down to 46 minutes to fit it in an hour time block. I'm excited to see what's going to happen with Turner, if they're going to be showing full games or if they'll be doing post-produced cut-downs of matches, just kind of featuring the highlights. But I feel like TV is a great place to find new eyes and maybe people who haven't seen it, but our audience lives online. There's, you know, if you talk to anyone who's kind of hardcore gamer or into the gaming scene right now, a lot of them don't even have cable right now. They're purely relying on their internet, and they're able to get their content through their computer or cell phone or everything else. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how the television audience receives it. And I'm actually really excited because this is going to be people's first chance for a lot of them tuning in and watching competitive games being played when maybe they didn't know it existed.
That lack of cable, the cord cutting is perhaps one of the reasons why Turner or someone like that would want to get involved in the industry to begin with. Now, speaking towards our growth from here, like how does the esports industry actually become, you know, we talk about the potential billions in revenue. How do we get there? Because it's still like an investment-driven industry right now. Chris, what do you see as being things that need to happen or are going to happen this year, next year, that are going to take this industry from, okay, everyone pile in and grab whatever land you can, to, okay, now the crops are starting to produce yield for us? It's a big question.
There are just so many different avenues
Right.
here in terms of growth, because you can do things in this space, and I kind of repeating myself, that you cannot do, that have not been done historically in other sports, right? It's like, could you really foresee what the NFL was going to be when football first, right, was played? Could you really foresee where it was going, how it was going to happen, right? I think like there will be innovative and creative ways to utilize this space, right? That, and I think we've seen this over probably the last 5 years, the way that these sort of sponsors and these companies have been using this online space to really get their product out in ways that they've never been able to before. This is going to be utilized as a marketing tool, just like any sport, right, in the future. And it's just figuring out the most efficient way to do that, because the viewer base is there and growing at breakneck speeds, and it's not projected to stop or slow. I mean, we're talking about selling out, right? Like Madison Square Garden in a matter of minutes. We're talking about selling out major venues all over the world at the same time. There is huge interest and following. It's figuring out, right, the next step. How do we fit in the ecosystem, right? And there are just, it's hard to talk about now, but there are so many different, really exciting avenues to get there.
Speaking broadly, what are some of those avenues? Not without going into specifics, perhaps. Like, what's an example of an avenue we're going to go down, you think, in the industry that's new, and it's going to help us reach that potential that we speak of, the P word, which is so popular here, as it should be, because there is so much of it?
So as I was saying, it's like finding ways to utilize the more intimate relationship, right, that your fans are going to have with your product. It's also like, it's digital. You can do anything in the digital space, right? And it's an evolving industry, right? There's not going to be any stagnation. As the technology moves, so will the industry. So will your ability, right, to affect people, to talk to people. So as virtual reality comes into the scene, right, we'll be primed to take advantage of that technology in sort of new ways. I'm just saying this industry will always evolve, will never stagnate. Like cable won't get left behind. And so, I mean, yeah, it's pretty hard for me to give specific examples about like where we're going and what we're doing, but I can say like, it's interesting to see what will happen, right, with E-League on traditional television. It's interesting to, like, everybody's eyes are tuned to see how this is going to affect the industry.
Right.
We're excited. And there will be new and interesting things happening. I mean, I don't know what we can talk about or what we can't really, but but Blizzard has some big things coming into the scene, which we're all excited to see what happens. I mean, so this next year is sort of going to be, I think, a lot of experimenting, and we'll see what sticks, right, and what doesn't. And this is sort of the seed of the future, I'd say, this year.
Sebastian, what are some ways you'd like to see the industry experiment and grow in the next year or two? Some things that you'd just like to see happen.
Sure. I mean, if you take a step back and you look at this industry, it's not an industry that we need to model purely off of traditional sports. That's one approach that can be taken, But I think it's naive or not forward-looking enough for us to be like, hey, like here's a model of something we've already done before. Let's replicate it directly onto this platform. That's not technology.
In fact, that way of going about it actually killed some efforts previously that Chris Puckett mentioned. The CGS, for example, was harmed largely because we tried to apply the traditional sporting model with MLB production, NBA production to a very different medium, a very different just everything. Like the product was so different, and we tried to carry over that same model. So it's already been proven it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, sure. And so the question then becomes, if you agree that that's not the model we should take, why spend so much time and energy into like shoehorning that model into this space? And I think that's a mistake. I think this is a technology that's different. And so if it's different, we should approach it differently. Like we didn't know, for example, Let's Plays on YouTube. If you guys don't know what Let's Plays are when people are just playing video games in front of a camera and they have the background of a casual video game. We didn't realize that would be such a big thing on YouTube until a number of years after YouTube had been out for a while. I think esports and the way we're approaching this problem is like we should view live streaming as a completely separate new media outlet. And I think esports is the best utility, I want to say. It's almost like a utility in the sense that like it's the thing that will just be on live streaming as the next big thing. And so understanding what that is would be great.
It's also a live product. Live has become a buzzword of sports and broadcast media because you have the DVR, you have TiVo, you can skip past commercials. That's why sporting expenses like the NFL rights have gone up so sharply because you can guarantee live viewership, or at least come close to guaranteeing it. You want to see these things play out live, so not only do we have the young audience, do we have the new platform of streaming to work with, it's also a live product that demands to be watched in the moment. But we haven't seen perhaps as many of the non-endemic companies get involved. So, your traditional advertisers you see on ESPN, not a lot of them are yet ready, it seems, to embrace esports, even as big as the numbers are, as much potential as there is. For anyone who wants to take this, actually, why do you think it is that we have these non-endemic companies who are not already involved in the tech space necessarily struggling perhaps to see this as, see the potential that we do?
I mean, I think the biggest problem we have as an industry and that we need to move away from is that we have such a huge focus on viewable hours. We talk about this all the time, right? Because we talk about how we do just as well as the NBA Finals, we do just as well as the NFL Super Bowl, et cetera. And those are all true. Like,
perhaps not the Super Bowl. That's kind of above.
Oh,
yes.
I mean, we'll get there. We'll get there. I mean, the focus, the reason why like March Madness does so well for CBS, the reason why a lot of these brands do super well is because you're not investing in the viewable hours. You're not investing in the demographic. You're investing in the brand. You're investing to associate yourself with the NFL, which you could do that if you like. And you can associate yourself with the NBA. And so in that sense, I think one of the movements that we see in esports, and hopefully this happens either with E-League or with something Riot does or Blizzard does or Valve does, or maybe a completely other game company does, is having that type of brand association. And once that happens, we're going to see more non-endemics come in. It's also really early, honestly. Like,
Right.
Esports used to be a sustainable industry. Like, I think people forget that, but like back when Chris was doing it and back when Chris got in, like esports was a sustainable industry that we like didn't pay ourselves anything, but like people got paid-ish, right? And so it's a fundamental change to go from that to being like a hyper-growth industry, and that's something we've only seen in the last 6 to 12 months.
As the numbers go up, the expectations also go up.
For sure.
And we see the potential. It's like, okay, let's capitalize on it right now. Chris, the same question to you. These companies not yet comfortable, perhaps, with the idea of esports, even as the numbers prove out as they do.
So, I mean, I think the hyper growth that we're seeing is because they're coming, right? Everybody knows they're coming, and they want to be poised to take advantage of that entry.
Right.
So, I mean, yes, as you were saying, like traditionally, like it was self-sustaining, right? I mean, in a little microcosm. Now that it's hyper growth, I mean, an LCS team has its value like on the
some
market.
context there, by the way. An LCS team is a professional League of Legends team that plays in the official League of Legends professional league.
That's right. That's right. So it's just one league of one game, and we're talking about one team. The numbers have shot up every 6 months by about, I don't know, 400% every 6 months. The value for just a space in that just one slot in that one league of that one game.
I think there was a great article in Daily Dot, actually,
As there often is.
About specifically Adrian, like a support player, like just one of the 5 people starting, saying that he made more in his signing bonus this year than he did in his salary last year.
Yeah, that's right.
Which,
So in that space, in League of Legends in particular, you have players, many players making well over $100,000, $200,000 a year, and that's becoming the norm. And keep this in mind, these are kids that last year were making 30 or 40. So that's the kind of growth we're talking about. Maybe even last split, right? Maybe 6 months ago, these kids were making 40. Today, they're making 240, right? And tomorrow, who knows where that number's going. So these are the kinds of numbers and the kind of growth we're talking about. The industry is just exploding.
And I think one of the reasons that we saw kind of the big brands so slow to make the move was it was kind of the wild, wild west. There was no consistency. You didn't really have the structure always in place where you knew it was coming up. You could bank on it. You could plan ahead with your marketing campaign that this was going to be a reoccurring event. Maybe it's going to consistently be in the same city or in the same place or even the same month. I feel like we now have that. Major League Gaming was always a sanctioning body, but we had to work with partners to use their games. Now Activision Blizzard purchasing Major League Gaming, we have access to their titles. We can have a little bit more sustainability. You see League of Legends, Riot came in and kind of took it over themselves, and they created the structure. They were able to put it in place and go about it every single year on the same pace or grow it each year if they wanted to. I think as you see more leagues coming in and putting more structure, more brands are getting behind it and they're trying to become a part of it, knowing that it's going to be consistent for them on the return.
I wanted to talk about the games involved in a moment here, because you mentioned League of Legends, you mentioned Blizzard. The games here are often very different. I want to get into that discussion. But first, you mentioned cities. So one big difference, if you're a sports fan, you're coming into esports, you don't have city name sports team. You don't have the Dallas Renegades. You don't have.
Actually, we are the LA Renegades.
they are the LA
That's true.
Renegades.
That's true, actually.
To be fair,
You're the worst
not
example I
about
could
true.
give.
There's a few of them.
Worst example I could give. Yeah.
Like
so,
literally the only person in North America whose team name has a city attached.
Yeah.
Found that guy.
Chris here ruined my example by showing
Well, I mean,
up.
that's because I got into the scene a lot. Like, I'm newer into the space,
Right.
and so it made sense to me to try to give a segue, sort of a lifeline to the non-endemic sponsors to sort of say, like, give them something they understand. So I attached a city, and I think that's where we're going. I
So
think
that's
cities
not the
will
norm
be
thus
attached.
far. We have seen that before with, we mentioned CGS again, which we're going to be, poo-pooing on here, I guess. CGS had city sports teams, city esports teams, I should say. It hasn't been a factor since then anywhere. In fact, you move around from city to city for different events. So you think, Chris, actually, that we're going to see the return of that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in tapping into that sort of tribalistic nature of the sports fan, right? I think traditional sports have utilized, I guess tribalism, is that fair?
I mean, regionalization, I think, is the word.
Regionalization. I like
Regionalization
tribalism
is
personally,
is the phrase. I mean, I completely agree. Like, I think what you did was so smart, right? Because when you tap and claim a city,
thank
you have people who are like going like, come, be like, oh, like I'm in LA. Who should I root for? The Lakers, the Dodgers, the Kings, the Rams, right? Well, 95 and post 2016, and like it's. I mean,
Sorry, St. Louis.
sorry, St. Louis. I mean, like, but that's a huge thing, and I think that is speaking of experimenting, like that we can go doing forward in esports. That's one big thing that might happen, but it probably may even be like regions of LA. Might be another one.
Oh, possibly. I mean, and as more leagues evolve and do their own thing, you might see it manifested in different ways.
Chris?
Right.
I think it's going to be interesting to see where the tournament organizers are going to go with this. Are they going to create one space where everyone competes in a regular fashion, or are we going to see kind of the traveling where you have in traditional sports? Will you have a New York team that is, in Madison Square Garden or over where the Nets play, Barclays Center, or in the teams like traveling to play against each other? Or will it all be kind of in LA, like how Riot has set up right now? I think it's going to be interesting over the next 5 years to see who's coming in with that money. Are they going to try and put their teams in arenas and grow the community around it? Or will it all just kind of be viewed online like it is right now?
Yeah, there's no real easy way to segue into being a fan right now because you don't have a city to rely on. It's just like, okay, I want to be a fan, so I have to find a team and personality I like. you have to find a CLG or in Call of Duty, Optic Gaming is the big name, and just because they're Optic Gaming. There's no city behind that. So it's very different, and we'll see if it evolves in that way. Getting back to the differences between the different games. So League of Legends, you mentioned that name. Mentioned Blizzard, they have Heroes of the Storm, Overwatch coming out this year, StarCraft 2, Valve has Counter-Strike, Dota 2. These are all very different games. When you say esports, you're referring to one industry, but the games in it look and feel so different. How do we make that work as a cohesive whole, especially when the league structures for the different games are so different themselves? It's all different.
Yeah, I was at a panel with this guy named Bryce Bloom who put it this way. It's like people would ask, do you think esports will ever be in the Olympics? And his response was, no, and I really like this and I agree with this. His response was, no, esports will never be in the Olympics, but there will one day be an Olympics of esports, right? So there will always be a bunch of different games, right, that have a bunch of different fans, much like in traditional sports. But they're not going to be stagnant, right? League of Legends, Counter-Strike won't necessarily be around forever, right? And as the technology grows, so will these games and these platforms. But we were talking about this earlier. We think there's probably going to be about 5 major games at any one point from now into the future. So like tier 1, about 5 different games. The big games today all do it very differently, and it's interesting to see the way they handle their IP, right? So Riot Gaming is the publisher for League of Legends, and they control their league with an iron fist. They control every aspect of production, of scheduling, all of it, right? Like, they completely manage it all. And then you have a publisher like Valve, which publishes Counter-Strike, which has completely hands-off, and they're like, take it, do what thou willst, we will sit back and watch, good luck, right?
I mean, I think even better example is if you look at Dota, right? If you look at Dota and what they've done there, they've basically been like, here, like, you guys go fund this.
Yeah.
And the audience has come back and said, yeah, here's $20 million to like go play.
And I think they might actually
Dota.
regret their crowdfunding at this point because it's gotten to be so big. It almost seems like the sustainability of it's questionable, and they prefer, I think, the smaller major system. But that's getting into some minutia at that point. So yeah, even the way we structure the games, like you compare, an NFL season to a ATP season. The league, the season versus the World Circuit. That's different. The LCS for League of Legends is a seasonal event, whereas Dota 2 or Counter-Strike have these big tours that go around. Of course, Turner perhaps
Major
trying to
events,
make a season thing for Counter-Strike. So is the seasonal approach the one that's good to go with? Is it the circuit, or is there some hybrid model? Doesn't really matter right
It's
now?
like, if you want to compare it, it's like the NFL is more comparable to what Riot's doing versus tennis, right? With its 4 majors,
Right.
which is what's
Tennis,
happening with like
golf is another great example.
Sure, or golf.
I mean, I think we're trying to shoehorn this too much, right? Like, I think it's overall like, here are different games. It's never going to be one game unless something crazy happens with VR, actually. Like, unless something crazy happens with VR where everyone's playing one game, a la like Ready Player One, like there's not going to be anything that's like split up. And so it's just like, these are different models. This is what we're doing. And I think it's not inappropriate, just like not maybe the best approach to pay too much homage to the traditional sports models when it comes to stuff like this.
And I think it's going to come down to the players. Right now, the most valuable thing in esports are the players. If you don't have the players, you don't have the team, you don't have that spot in LCS, you don't get the sponsorship money. And I think if you look at what Counter-Strike is doing right now, there are tournaments every single weekend of 2016. We have a nationwide arena is sold out for our event at the end of March, but then you also have people playing over in Croatia right now. And these players are on a plane more often than they're at home. And I think over time, the players are gonna kind of band together and say that we can only go to X amount of tournaments, we need an off season, we need a break. Because at the current pace, I think it's not sustainable.
You're going to give the U word, the union?
I didn't want to say it, but yeah.
Again, other words we should have mentioned alongside bubble. I mean, I think it's true. Like, the amount of travel people currently do is unsustainable. People think that people mechanically get worse at video games, and that's why they quit, but that's not why they quit video games.
You burn out.
You burn out, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to say, but there's a jungler who has a really nice girlfriend, and they want to hang out, but they have to practice all the time, and like the team owner was like, nope, you can't come into the house. Then he's like, well, I'm going to retire then, right? Like people do that, and like that's the difference between what we have currently, because we don't know what's next, and what we may have in the future, where we're like, oh, we'll have an off season of a couple months.
One quick note as we talk about different games, to be clear, like 36 million, a big number for viewership, that's just one game. That's just League of Legends. 27 million is for the second biggest game, Counter-Strike.
That's
viewership.
one event. That's
Yeah.
one day
Yeah.
of one game.
The final, just like the one match, actually.
It's one match of
Yeah,
one game.
for one game.
One
so you,
day.
you multiply
right?
that from there. One thing I think it's interesting to go into, so for Riot, they have, I think, something like 70% plus of their players also watch their esports events, which is a great number for them. They basically advertise their esports. But we see a lot of that where the players are often the fans. Now, in traditional sports, like football, for example, American football, obviously most fans of American football do not play American football. That's not the case in esports. Most people who watch it and enjoy it play esports pretty actively. How do we and how can we get to a point where we generate fans and viewers who aren't necessarily active players at the same time? Or because
I would
because
say
it's
we're
gaming,
already
do
doing
you
it.
have to?
We're definitely already doing it. And also for that instance, I think that the time scale is a little bit of a misnomer here. Like it's definitely the case that I like baseball, for example, which makes me very rare in esports. And I like baseball, and I played baseball growing up. I played Little League. So like that to me is like, oh, this is why I can appreciate this. But I also never touched the football from like at any like competitive level, and I enjoy watching football. Similarly, in esports, I think you're starting to see this as well. You're going to see people who really like Hearthstone as a game and have never played StarCraft or Dota, for example, but can appreciate high-level play in Dota. And I think that's when the time scale is just too short right now. We haven't had enough time with all these games to really truly appreciate it beyond that. And I think at the end of the day, like most people in the United States growing up historically have played sports at some level, in some capacity. And now most people have played video games at some level in some capacity. And so if the audience is anyone who plays video games can be a fan of esports, and I believe that, and if that's true, then I think we're fine. Like I think there's so many people who come in then.
Yeah, it's about understanding the way the game is played so you can appreciate it being played at the highest level, like any sport, right? Like, if you don't understand the rules of football, it's not very exciting to watch football. Somebody has to sit down and explain to you, here's how you play, and then you can start appreciating the plays that you see. So, yeah, you have to understand how to play a game in order to enjoy watching it.
I think that's changing with a lot of personalities kind of exploding on YouTube. There's a lot of people, we'll go back to the Nade Shot example. A lot of people know Nade Shot and they've seen kind of his highlights of Call of Duty, but a lot of them don't own a console or even play the game. Maybe they found him when he was playing Minecraft on YouTube. A lot of people are starting to attach themselves to a personality once again, and I see more and more people that maybe never had a gift or a talent for playing competitively that are still fans of esports just because they're rooting on someone that they feel close to, that they're able to interact with on a regular basis, and that they want to support.
One comparison I like to make actually is, 20 years ago, Mario was mostly a mascot for kids. Now Mario is just a part of the cultural fabric like Mickey Mouse. 20 years from now, esports, which is today, wherever you think it is demographically, will be that much more widespread. It's just a matter of time. Kind of shifting gears here, I want to talk about issues, problems, things that you think should be fixed, need to be fixed from where things are today to get to where we're talking about the growth the next year, the years after that. Whoever wants to take this on first?
Nothing. Everything is perfect. Everything is great.
Yeah. Please invest more. Yeah, come on in.
I personally would like to see more structure and sort of dependability in the way tournaments are run. Like, I would like, or reliability, I guess is the better way to put it, so that people know how, when to watch what they're watching. Like, I like what Riot did for the space. I think that you don't need to have an iron fist and control everything about your league, but I would like to see organizers create more just like reliability from year to year, like repeatability.
Right.
So, that's an avenue for the layman to come in. Because right now you have to be a little bit savvy to know exactly what's being played when in certain
I
games.
think journalism and media probably plays a big role in that. So it's just like stuff like Daily Dot, stuff like ESPN, stuff like The Score, those guys being more involved and being more active and having larger staffs, I think is something that we need to see in this space because it will bring in more people.
Yep.
And that's useful. Other than that, I think it's like more visibility, I think, from game publishers. I think if you look at the leverage situation, like teams have exposure to each other, and we all have exposure to game publishers, like the Riots, the Valves, and whatnot. But you rarely, if ever, understand their inner workings. And it'd be nice to get get more feedback as a symbiotic relationship moving forward.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
That would be great.
Chris, anything from you?
On my end, I'm a production guy, so I'm a host. I do play-by-play commentary, and for me, there's nothing worse than watching a bad production at this point. So I think outside of the sanctioning body and someone to look out for the players, I'd love there to be a minimum level of prize money, production value, and just overall quality of the event. And I think that it's going to come down to the people that make the games that will eventually have to make those decisions and put those rules in place. But I think we're heading in a great direction. We've always learned in esports. Since the very beginning, you make a mistake, you learn from it, you iterate, you change, you improve. And I think we're going to keep doing that. The big one, I think, right now is visibility. You kind of have to be in the know to be a real fan or a hardcore fan. And I think making it more discoverable and raising the visibility and getting the word out is kind of the big change I'd like to see over the next 2 years.
Right. Fortunately, millions and millions are in the know, but millions and millions of more could be and could
Right.
see the product
Sure,
if
sure.
it was more visible to them.
The numbers are showing that people, there is tremendous growth.
Yeah.
So
Right.
these fans are coming from somewhere, and I think it is from less niche areas.
And I read an article recently. It said 70% of Americans have a console. Between 18 and 64, I believe, have some kind of gaming device in their house. 18% of that know about esports or have watched esports. And that number doubled over the last 2 years. So I think there's definitely more people finding out about it, but we're going to get to a point where every single person who has a gaming device is hopefully aware and supporting esports at some point in their life.
Yep.
Yeah, if you're aware of sports, you are aware of pro sports. If you're aware of gaming, you should be aware of pro gaming. That's the idea anyway
Right.
to go.
Yeah.
Now, I think we're about 3/4 through here. We could talk all day, and I think we might off the panel. But I do want to offer perhaps some Q&A opportunities if there are any questions people want to ask. I think we have a microphone at the front. We can go ahead and get that going.
Well, that was a great decision, Jared. Good job.
I think
Well done, sir.
I am the host of the panel. That's
I mean-
kind of my thing, Sebastian.
I mean, you really are on top of this.
So we'll go ahead, sir.
Hello.
There we go.
Hi. So on issues, there's an almost complete invisibility of female esports athletes. If you look on Twitch, I've never seen a female team actually, in one of the major tournaments on the front page of Twitch. There's hardly any mixed gender teams. I think there's a lot of sexism still in esports in the structure. And then there's player contracts, player burnouts, the history of people not being paid in esports for things that they've done. I mean, I'm amazed you didn't see many issues.
Yeah, the demographic thing I mentioned before, it's about 90-10, I think, by most measures in favor of
Well, actually,
men right
there's
now.
a lot of female fans, but I had a female on my team this year, in LCS, in the highest league of League of Legends. There was a female on my team. She played for about a month and a half before she couldn't take the pressure, and yeah, it was a tough journey for her the whole time. Like there is a lot of sexism. You're dealing with 15-year-old kids, 16-year-old kids. Like they act out for attention. Like it exists. It's tough. Like it's tough for a girl to be successful in this industry. There's no doubt about it. And I think that it's getting better. The way the community acted from when this girl started to when she left, there was dramatic improvement. Is it good enough? Like hell no. But it was so bad that she couldn't sustain it. So I will give it to you. Like there needs to be some changes here, but I mean it's happening, like slowly, but it's not impossible to have women in this industry.
And this industry isn't perfect. This industry is, frankly, there are a lot of awful things about this industry. And like, by no means are there no issues. But I think it'd be also incorrect for us to focus purely on the issues as like as a problem. I think a lot of things that happened soft recently were, for example, people are getting paid now, which is huge for us. I really enjoy being able to afford my rent every month.
Health insurance?
I mean, for some of us, maybe for you, Chris, but like, but I think, I completely agree. I think there are a lot of systemic issues, and I think it's incredibly mindful. I think you brought up some really good ones. Sorry, we didn't get your name, but you brought up some great issues, and I think those are things that we actively talk about. And so by no means are we trying to sweep it under the rug. It's far more. It's hard because we as people, I think, all want to have solutions for things, and these are problems where there aren't any easy solutions.
Except it's like naturally, it's getting better.
Right.
These are sort of a lot of these problems are solving themselves.
Right. Well,
With the
it's a
input.
young industry, and with that, youth becomes immaturity, unfortunately.
Sure.
And over time, it matures by itself, just through time. So,
Let's hope.
that's not a great answer. Just wait, basically. But that will happen over time.
But that's a whole other panel.
Yeah, it is actually. Go ahead.
So my name is Christina, and so you talked about how at any given time, maybe like 5 games will be the big esports. My question is, who are the kingmakers? Who determines what those 5 esports are? Because you have game developers popping up left and right saying, like, we want esports to be part of our marketing. We want our game to be competitive. Then you have older games like StarCraft that are still sort of trying to be propped up by Blizzard and that huge machine behind it. So is it the leagues? Is it the sponsors? Is it the game developers?
It's the community. Sorry.
I'll first say, by the way, the developers do not get to decide because every developer wants to have esports. It sounds great, right? It doesn't work that way. The developers don't say, this game has esports capability, therefore go out and create a pro scene for it. It just doesn't work that way.
I mean, like they have some say, right? I mean, there's definitely the 3 metrics that Jen's the former CEO of ESL, came up with was prize pool, 5 million or greater, 8 million or more active users, and something like 20 million or more viewable hours in any given month. And like Chris was saying, it's a community.
Yeah.
Like, community makes it. I mean,
If there's no audience, there's no event, right? If you're not going to have support for something that isn't going to pick up and kind of take off naturally. And I think that's something that we've seen over the last 15 years of the most popular games are the ones that get the most attention. And I think the publishers are now kind of hip to it and making sure that they're marketing properly and getting as many eyes on their game as possible. But at the end of the day, if it's a bad game or if it's a poor competition, you're not going to have people watching it, in my opinion.
And you never know what'll strike a chord in the community, right?
Right.
Like tomorrow, somebody might come out with some very simple game that just really speaks to this community, right? And that is now going to be the hottest next game, right?
I think you look at Rocket League. Rocket League exploded out of nowhere, and everyone that was on Twitch just kind of supported it, and you saw people from all different games kind of getting into it because it was simple, it was competitive, and it was just one of those awesome moments where a great product just took off organically.
Or alternatively, right, you have a big publisher in Blizzard coming out with Overwatch in the future, and now we as an industry believe that's going to be a huge esport, right? Because it's from a big publisher, they're putting a lot of money behind it as an esport. It could flop, it could take off, we'll see. Who knows? So like, who's the kingmaker? Like, maybe the publisher has some say in it. The community certainly is the judge.
but it's
right?
the gamers. It's the gamers.
It's the gamers, but it's like, do it better.
Yeah.
And if you do it better, then you'll succeed.
No one can say this is going to be an esport. You can't just
Yeah, you
come out of the
can't.
gate like that.
It's
The community
impossible to
decides
say
over
it's
time.
successful.
The developer can help by making a good game, but that's as best they can do.
Right.
Cool, thank you.
Hi, my name is Rob Mann. Very new to it, so I'm going to ask a question that may be naive. I've heard the comment, somebody said if they get tired of it, they'll just quit the team, or people are logging in, 50,000 people to log in to see somebody practice. So the question ultimately is, what's the value of the team, unless it's a multiplayer format?
What's the value of the team?
What's the value of a player being part of a team, right? Baseball, football inherently is a team sport. I'm hearing, though, comments that suggest it's more focused on the player. So what's the value add of the team itself? participating in a team unless it's a multiplayer format.
They're all team-based games.
I mean, even
Most
the
of
ones
them,
that
yeah,
aren't.
most
Yeah.
of them,
I mean,
yeah.
like it's team-based, and the ones that aren't
Okay.
are also. I mean, it's actually a fundamental question in all sports franchises. Like, what is the value of the Green Bay Packers outside of Aaron Rodgers? And the value is that there's been Brett Favre before him, and before that we had Bart Starr. We don't. I think this is another interesting time delineated issue. Teams are new. Players are going to play for teams, but teams ought to outlive players. And once that happens, there will be more historical value with the teams.
So my question, okay, I don't mean to cut you off, but then why can't the players just form their own teams?
I mean, they have. Like Archon was a team that was formed by former players. And frankly speaking, most teams were formed by former players. The mechanisms of running a business and running a startup in a growing space, though, are very different.
Yeah, we should say we have players who are often 16 years old coming into the space. They need teams and franchises because they're 16 years old and they need that kind of support. They need agency, they need health insurance, they need a lot of things besides a big audience.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for the panel. My name's Tom, and so for me, when I look at the four major traditional American sports, I see kind of an American bubble where, like, for instance, I don't see a lot of NHL fans watching the KHL, like Russian hockey. I don't see a lot of baseball fans watching Japanese baseball. So to use like League of Legends, for example, like the global impact of this is huge. Like pretty much everybody I know watches the LCK and watches Korea and China, Taiwan, especially Europe. So I just wanted to see if you guys could talk about the global impact of esports.
Well, that's a credit to Riot, really. It's a credit to them for presenting the LCK, which is, by the way, the Korean competition in League of Legends, for presenting that to an American audience and to a European audience in such a good way. And the Chinese game as well. They make that happen through their production, which is a credit to not only them, but also their model and how they manage that. So, the Iron Fist has its pros and cons. That's one pro to handling it all yourself.
Yeah, I mean, so like esports is a global industry, there's no doubt about it, and it's really exciting, right? Because that opens up, again, like something to differentiate, right, what it is that esports can bring to the table. So actually I would say for League of Legends, we talk about like tribalism or regionality. It's no longer like necessarily regional within a country, it's regional within the world. So you have a lot of North American fans and European fans and Korean fans and North Americans who support Korea and Koreans who support Europe or whatever, right? So it's now becoming, so what esports is, or what League of Legends is very regional and on a global scale.
Speed of light eliminated, actually.
I mean, basically, you've taken down all barriers, right? And so now it's like a sport that is viewed by the world as opposed to by certain regions of a country.
One more benefit of the nature of it is that it's all online, so that inherently passes through those traditional barriers.
Although there's really, I found this out the other day, but the speed of light's not fast enough, is what someone told me when I was in China the other day. I was like, the speed of light's not fast enough, so regional locks happen because of ping, which is really cool. So like in the past, regionalization happened because airfare travel is so expensive. It's hard for a European team to come to America or vice versa. And now it's just like, because the speed of light is the speed of light, you can only get so much ping between LA and Korea.
Right.
And so I think that's pretty freaking cool.
10,000th of a second, make it unplayable. these kids are so spoiled, I'm telling you.
We're going to try to get through all the questions here, but thank you for that one.
Thank you guys for your time. My name is Darius Sims, and I know Chris earlier was speaking about the fact that because of technology, we're not really seeing esports stagnating. However, I can see some ways in which I currently think that it is, especially in active versus passive participation on mobile platforms. We have games like Hearthstone and Minecraft that are actually really, really huge, and people can play and experience those games anywhere, but they can't participate in esports on those games anywhere. I think that it's a very important issue because when you see platforms such as mobile and the Wii lowering the amount of accessibility it takes to do a task, you also see more females participating almost inherently. And so do you think that this is a problem for game developers and publishers to solve, or is this something more for streaming platform creators to solve, that gap in being able to actively and passively participate on mobile devices?
Chris Puckett?
Chris Puckett.
Activision Esports?
No, I do think that we're going to see more and more games able to be played on the mobile. I think anytime you have a PC title like Counter-Strike, where you need 5 people all playing with a mouse and keyboard, I think it's all going to come down to controls, is what games are able to be played on mobile devices.
Well, this is why I particularly mentioned Hearthstone. It's got a huge, it's normally, I think it's been in the top 5 on Twitch for what, maybe years at this point?
Yes.
And it's entirely touch-based. So controls are not an issue here, but we're still seeing that divide.
Right. So I think you're still seeing people playing on their mobile device, but a lot of the players that are competing, they're doing it on their computer and they're live streaming in a lot of cases. And I think you're seeing people kind of go with what they're comfortable. And a lot of people from the esports scene have definitely grown up playing on the computer devices. But in terms of what's going to happen in the future, I can't really speak to any of that quite yet. I'm pretty new at Activision Blizzard, but definitely looking forward to learning more.
And a mouse and keyboard do offer perhaps more input opportunities than a phone does, at least for now. So that's another limiting factor in that regard. I want to thank you, though. We'll see if we can burn through all these.
How's it going? My name is Steve Ayers. My questions, first of all, when I think about professional sports or baseball, football, those things, you think about the history and you think about the statistics and all the reasons, and I was a Little League player just like Sebastian, so there's a continuity there. And what I don't really know, because I'm new to the esports thing, like with rules and changes and software updates and things like that, what the impact of those things are on records that certain types of geeks are really interested in. The second question I have is, anywhere there's sports, there's gambling, and I was wondering if fantasy gaming is a thing yet, or
It's huge.
That's its own panel as well. That's like 2 panels, perhaps, the fantasy thing. It's a big thing. If you can think of something like that in traditional sports, it probably translates. So yeah, fantasy is a big thing. How that's implemented, again, is just a very long discussion in terms of just the inner workings of fantasy and gambling in the esports context, but it's definitely a thing. I think stats and information like that is not yet, we don't have the historical context for that to be a big thing yet. We had like the CS record broken in the LCS recently.
Yeah.
I mean, no, the records, like so your question was, there's patch updates, games changed, balance changes.
Right.
Does that change records? So a lot of records are looked at sort of in a sort of bubble, right? So it's like in 2013, what are the significant things that happened?
Right.
Right.
And part of what made sports work is the longevity of it. And baseball, the rules of baseball haven't changed a whole heck of a lot for 100 years.
Yeah.
I mean, software is has to be different than that. I mean, it just has to.
I mean,
So
but
I just
baseball
wonder how
changes
that's
a
gonna
lot. Like baseball's changed from the dead ball era, so not to be go up baseball buff on you guys, but from the dead ball era to the modern pitcher era to this power steroid era. Do you have to throw away the entirety of how baseball was played in the 90s because they had steroids? I mean, I think the fact of the matter is that like esports is going to see these type of records come up. It's going to start with kids remembering, oh, I remember when there were patch Zergs. Like, this is a really obscure reference, but like back in StarCraft, there were these Zerg players who, we remember them as being champions during that time, but in reality, they were probably only good because the game was tilted towards them. And similarly, right now, we see like Clayton Kershaw is doing really well, but how much of that is him being phenomenal versus the game being balanced for him? And the answer is it's a combination of the two. And so we're going to remember guys, we're going to remember Faker's run last year. We're going to remember Nadeshot doing all this crazy stuff for the past few years. And I think that memory is what's going to stay with us as opposed to like remembering, oh wait, we shouldn't really say that because Rise Mid was like viable back then, and now it's not, and it's changed, and like don't worry. People remember the more visceral, hey, like I remember when I was there for Barry Bonds type of stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name's Sam. I just got a question regarding sort of the TV and moving to that. One of the beautiful things about esports is the fact it's so accessible. You can just jump on Twitch, you can jump on YouTube. Yet the key thing about live sports and TV is it's exclusive. That's how they make their money. How do those two interact, and where would the meeting point be?
That is a great question. So again, we have some companies like Riot, for example, who have an iron grip on their game, and if you want to have any League of Legends content, you might have to have nothing else but that because they want that to be the showcase game at your event. Then we have a Valve, who are, again, very hands-off, very much wanting you to actually take it for yourself. So it varies by developer, by company, which creates, I think it's difficult to answer questions just because of that right now, because Valve and Riot, as two big examples, have such different approaches. Perhaps Activision Blizzard has their own approach that Chris Bucket could help us have some context on.
I'm guessing
As I look over at my PR guy.
I'm guessing as well, I'm talking about also from the TV side, say ESPN wanted to stream the World, or like the World Series of League. They want to be the only one doing that. Because that's how they're going to make their revenue, whereas that kind of goes counter.
I mean, there's nothing preventing them from. It's just expensive, it's cost prohibitive, and it makes no sense for them.
Yeah, I mean, Riot would demand a pretty penny to have exclusivity for a league right now.
So what you're talking about, so like, I know that, so the reason Counter-Strike is coming to TV is because of Valve's very laissez-faire attitude with their hands-off approach, right, with their game. I know that there were talks with Riot to get in, but there was just, Riot demanded too much oversight, right, for League of Legends on TV. They wanted to run every part of the production, right, which is not going to work in a, right, when it's being produced by Turner. They're going to want control over the production. So, like, and also I think certain games lend themselves better to a TV audience, right? Counter-Strike is a bunch of 2-minute games, one right after the other. So it's easy to take commercial breaks. It's easy to I would say, control the timing of it a little bit better. I mean, but
It's more predictable for the producers.
I think I think like whatever happens with TV, this is going to be a transition ultimately back to eventually, right, the digital, the internet. Like whatever's happening with TV, we all know is going to be a temporary stepping block to the future.
I'm excited to see where it goes because honestly, I want the content everywhere. I don't think we should be limited. Like growth is the #1 goal for me right now. We're seeing explosive growth. I want to see it continue. But I think you're going to have to approach the content differently depending on your platform. In the TV world, you may not be able to broadcast a 12-hour tournament like you can on the web, but you can also do a cut down in television format. So it'll be interesting to see the people behind that content, how they decide to shape it and display it. But I definitely think it is going to become interesting in a few years when you kind of have the ESPNs of the world trying to bid for a specific event. Will it be exclusive on one platform and not others, or will you be able to watch it on your mobile device that's tied in with that TV channel because television is going to be moving in that direction?
And considering the spread of online streaming, what's the price point for making a League of Legends exclusive to one television channel? It's probably high. Is it a reasonable price point to even pay for? So it's a big question. We're going to see the answer, I think, in the next few years.
I'm excited to see Chris Puckett on radio. If we're going to every platform,
I'm ready.
Thank you.
Silent movies.
Hi, my name is Juan Jose. I came from Mexico, so I have been involved in the scene in Latin America. And my question is more like in sports like soccer, you have one team like Manchester City that it's building their own brand, and then they come here to the MLS and they have this other team in New York. Are you planning to work, or do you see working with other regions, specifically in my case in Latin America, that you can make a collaboration or you can expand the brand of the teams in that way? Because right now it's like the Wild Wild West, working with the players. Sometimes they are, some not. But I think if it's also because they feel so distant to the professional scene. So, do you have plans? Do you look Latin America as one potential market or a collaboration that you could do there?
I mean, League of Legends is enormous in Brazil, for example.
we have a bunch. We were training and trying out a bunch of Peruvian and Chilean players recently, and one Mexican player as well. I think the biggest barrier right now is because we're such a nascent industry. Is globalization is really hard, like really hard, and it's really hard for us, especially as like American-born sports guys, to go to Latin America and have a really strong sense there without having connections already built in. And so I think it's a little bit of both. Like you'll definitely see a lot of guys out there who will come up to the States. I think Quaz, I think is from Central America. He was a star top laner last year in League of Legends. And then Smash is like an amazing Dota player from Mexico. And so like it's pretty good there.
Chris actually owns teams in Australia and in different regions, so not quite Latin America, but you have the
Well, actually,
cross-regional-
like I have a team that's 5 Australians, and we flew them to the States
Right.
to live and train here.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think your question was more like, how can we involve the Latin American community and audience in a more like professional way?
It's more like because the market is growing there. I mean, there's the people.
Right.
I think there's people with qualities that might be in a good level professional. No.
Yeah.
So I think that sometimes the local scene is not so professional, but also that you have now the experience that you're leading in this field. Like if you can rescue those guys, because if not, it's like the scene will be going behind. It will be keeping behind all the other areas, and it will be.
Yeah, just looking at the lay of the land, it is, in terms of development, a bit behind, for example, the US or
Asia.
Western Europe, most of Asia. But there is good talent there, and there's a lot of potential there. It's just a matter of, I think there are challenges in investing in Latin America right now, economically, versus investing in the US, or investing in some parts of Western Europe, or investing in a sure thing in Korea, which is, of course,
Well,
a
I mean,
different beast.
Great talent is great talent. Doesn't matter where it comes from.
Yeah.
So we just need the tools to recognize where that talent is, and we will take those.
But then do you build that talent in Latin America locally, or do you just bring it over here?
I mean, that's the hard part. Like
Yeah.
Heat Stars does so well out there, but it's like, again, it's a problem with distance as well. It's hard to practice against Peruvian teams. Like they have to either play on 200 ping, or we have to play on 200 ping. And we're America, so we're just not going to play on 200 ping. Is really the response a lot of our guys give. And so like that's concerning. I think as esports grows, we'll see more opportunity. I mean, we see this already in baseball, and I think that's a really good example for Latin America, specific, and South America as well. It's just like maybe that's what happens, but that's a great question. I have no idea.
It's inevitable that will trickle down. I wish that Latin America could be better involved sooner than it is. I think it's just a question of the economics being more difficult for people to invest in than perhaps in North America or Western Europe. It's an easier place.
In Counter-Strike, there is a team, Luminosity Gaming. They used to be Kaboom Esports, but they just finished second at one of the largest Counter-Strike tournaments over in Poland. I think they do have a team house in the States right now.
They do.
But
Yeah, they do.
Fallen is the captain of the squad, and he's been doing some great stuff in Brazil. He brought on 5 newcomers, kind of took them under his wing. They're now a top 10 competitive squad. So I think we've always seen some talent in South America, Latin America, but it's really just coming down to, have they been able to perform on land? Historically, none of the teams have really been able to reach that top 8 until recently. So it's great to see kind of the new teams coming out and the support from Brazil. Every time you see Luminosity Gaming play, it's amazing to see it in the chat.
Brazilians are the best fans.
Yeah, so it's a multi-year.
Multi-year.
Yeah,
It's a
it's a
multi-year.
tough question to answer, and it's a long-term, I think, solution.
Okay.
Basically. But thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank Chris Puckett, a host from Activision Blizzard, Chris Badawi, owner of Renegades, Sebastian Park, owner of Team Archon, and myself, of course, Jared Wynn, Director of Partnerships.
We'd like to thank you too, Jared.
Yes, thank you. I thank myself as well. Director of Partnerships for Daily.esports, and thank you all for attending here. I hope it was informative to you. Informative, I should say, not informative. Either way. Informative for you, and we certainly enjoyed it ourselves. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.